Recovery Sort Of is a podcast where we discuss recovery topics from the perspective of people living in long-term recovery. This podcast does not intend to represent the views of any particular group, organization, or fellowship. The attitudes expressed are solely the opinion of its contributors. Be advised, there may be strong language or topics of an adult nature.
Welcome back. It's Recovery Sort Of. I am Jason, a guy who is so self-disciplined we still record this podcast.
And I'm Billy. I'm a person in long-term recovery.
And we're going to talk about the spiritual principle of self-discipline, which I can already tell you I probably do not believe in. Because it just seems weird. And I think you made a good point about like so spiritual principles to me are like kind of like God-given or universe-given tools. It's almost like we draw on this worldly energy in order to be able to do them. And I guess, looking at your face right now, I'm like, yeah, that's not Billy's belief.
Yeah.
But
No, I'm just trying to follow along with you. That's all.
yeah. So like, if I want more humility, I send that message out to the world, whether that's praying for it or whether, I think your version is more like the prayer puts the intention out into your mind more often. So you see the opportunities to practice it more. I think that's,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So they're kind of like these things that we have to ask for in some way, shape, or form, if that's tricking our brains or if that's because there's God, whatever.
Right.
But like self-discipline literally has the word self in it, as if it's something I have to train my body or brain to do for me. And that does not sound like the same as the rest of them.
Yeah, it's difficult to look at self-discipline as a spiritual principle, I was reading a little bit about it, and I guess the idea that seemed to work best for me as far as incorporating it in as a spiritual principle is that the way they described it in this reading was it's like a culmination of some other spiritual principles give us self-discipline. So like once we have developed our morality, once we're practicing honesty and trust and integrity, all those together culminate into a person that is self-disciplined because we're not just running on impulses. We're not just acting any old way that we want. We can refrain from reckless or dangerous behavior. So in that, I could kind of see like, okay, it's like that self-discipline is a culmination of practicing a bunch of other spiritual principles.
Well, that makes sense, I guess.
Yeah.
I tell you the first problem I had, so I went to look up for it and I was looking for I'm always trying to find the science behind it. Like, what does science tell us? Is there research that says that this is actually a thing or you can improve it or anything? And I struggled to find that because even in the initial searching for that kind of research, there is a huge gap between people's definitions of self-discipline, self-control, and willpower. And trying to figure out if they're the same, if they're different.
Gosh, yeah, I never even thought of that.
Yes, and that's exactly what came up in the search. I was like, fuck, what's the difference between
willpower? Oof.
Right, or self-control? Is that the same? I don't. And so I got a whole lot of different versions of that. So maybe that's just where we end up at, trying to figure out if self-discipline is even different than these other things, and if it is, how.
Huh, yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought much about that, so that's a whole new idea now that's rattling around in my brain.
I get it. So, maybe going through some of these different takes on it will help us kind of explore it more. Okay. So, the original definition of self-discipline, if you just go to the dictionary, is the ability to control one's feelings and overcome one's weaknesses. Also, the ability to pursue what one thinks is right despite temptations to abandon it. So, this would, I guess, I feel like the easiest example is the nutrition plan diet kind of idea, right? My plan is that I want to get a little healthier for my life. And so I go home and I have the options of salad or chocolate. Which one am I? You know what I mean? Avoiding the chocolate is the self-discipline of I can put off the temptation of chocolate because I have a goal in mind.
Yeah. I mean, that's the way I look at most of those, the gym or eating or, financial stuff. That's where that concept comes up the most, I guess.
Not talking to the female that's not your wife in hopes that something arises. Right. This idea of just avoiding temptation or not having the overwhelming obsession to give in to temptation, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess I'm trying to think back now, and I guess in my active using phase, like I felt like if I thought that shit, I owed it to myself to do it. You know what I mean? Like if I was dating someone and I saw another girl that I liked, it wasn't like, oh, I'm in a relationship. It was like, she might be the one. I might be with this wrong one over here, and she might be the one. Or it would just be, well, this one's here now, and this could be a lot of fun, so I'm just going to do that, and we'll see what happens.
I mean, Jen's like a hippie, isn't there a song about that? Isn't she into that? Love the one you're with or something? Like, she'll be all right. No, yeah, I'm thinking back, you saying in your active addiction, and I'm like, fuck, in my active recovery, that was part of my life.
Well,
like, got it. And I really think, I remember my therapist with like, I guess it was 9 or 10 years clean, and her telling me, you know, because I would get these obsessions to whatever it was, you know, and she would say, what do you think's going to really happen if you don't? Do you think you're going to die? And I know that sounds ridiculous to the rational mind, because obviously I was not going to die if I didn't send a text message or something like that, but it felt like that in my body.
Yeah.
And it was the practice of like her kind of challenging me of like, do you really think you're going to die, motherfucker? Right? Like I was like, ooh, no, I'm definitely not going to die. I'm going to do this.
Yeah, maybe not that I would die, but that could be like the opportunity or thing that my fucking life had been waiting for up to that moment.
Right, and I miss it. Yeah,
that job, that girl, that whatever thing that it was that, you know, it was like, this is the thing that's going to make me finally happy or whole or fulfilled or whatever.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. And that was actually the beginning of my practice of meditation, was like, I need to find a way to sit still with this obsessive compulsive idea that I am just going to run with whatever thought comes to mind that feels good.
Right.
So that was the self-discipline. So I think we're kind of like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. But how is that definition different from willpower?
Yeah, that's where I'm a little stuck.
Well, okay, so I kind of do like, so another definition, a willpower definition is control exerted to do something or restrain impulses. So it's almost like, to me, if I had to try to separate these, self-discipline is the overall practice of like doing the thing that is going to be good for me later versus what feels good now. And willpower is like the actual resource or energy I use in the moment. Right.
Yeah, right. Okay.
It's like I draw on willpower to maintain my self-discipline or something.
Yeah.
But then self-control comes in and it fucks me off. So self-control, the ability to control oneself, in particular one's emotions and desires, or the expression of them in one's behavior, especially in difficult situations. That sounds exactly like self-discipline.
Yeah, those two sound the same to me, I would say. I mean, to me personally, I would use them interchangeably. Self-control or self-discipline. Self-discipline just sounds tougher.
It sounds more like programmed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Self-control just sounds like some shit you did on your own. Self-discipline sounds like you were either in the military or you went to a Buddhist convent for a while, or like you were literally in somewhere that taught you this. So a couple of the different websites that decide to differentiate. I
was thinking they use self-discipline in martial arts a lot.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking. It's like you have to go somewhere and study for a year to get self-discipline.
Somebody with a robe's got to teach you about that.
So on the Forbes website, which I'm not a huge fan of Forbes, not because I hate Forbes or anything, but just because a lot of times when I try to read their articles, they tell me I can't. So it gets on my nerves.
Right. You got to pay.
Yeah. So
like
they
Chevy's
say
better.
Yeah. They say self-control and willpower are different. Self-control refers to managing your behavior to achieve goals, improve positive outcomes, and avoid negative consequences, whereas willpower is the ability to resist short-term temptations and desires to achieve long-term goals. I feel like even though they say they're different, they still have to both be present in order for either of them to work.
Yeah, they work together or something.
Or like willpower might work without self-discipline, but that's the guy that comes in, gets 24 days, and then goes back out every time. Like he can do the willpower for a short amount of time.
Yeah, for once or twice, right? But can't sustain it. Yeah, self-discipline sounds more sustainable. sustaining it.
Yeah. So this other website.
There we go. We just sustained willpower.
Right.
That's self-discipline.
Done. All right. See y'all next week. So another separation that I found was willpower is a rather sudden and momentary burst of focused energy, whereas self-discipline is structured, well thought out, and consistent. So willpower in the moment is more tangible and seemingly more powerful, but the reality would be that self-discipline dwarfs willpower because it's a long-term event, I guess.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that falls more in line with what you were saying, like willpower is a piece needed for self-discipline. That seems to fit into that for me.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just such an interesting thing. But anyway, I didn't get much past that because I couldn't figure out the fucking words or the science. I do believe what I've looked up kind of is in line with what I think is that self-discipline can't really be scientifically proven to be a thing. And they're not. Like the scales they've created to measure it, they've tried them again in different ways, and it basically doesn't work. So they're like, okay, we're not measuring self-discipline anymore. We don't know what this fucking measurement was. We measured something and it correlated with good outcomes in life, because that's what they found originally was people who report having great self-discipline turn out to fucking get further in the way we look at social success.
Yeah. And I guess so now I'm trying to work through the whole, like the spiritual principle thing and how self-discipline fits into all that. And I guess if I were to think of how I look at self-discipline, as a principle or spiritual principle to live by, like I go back to, okay, all these things for me are like tools that we have available to deal with life and life circumstances and situations, right? So if I'm angry, obviously I can try to practice tolerance or patience or, whatever, maybe kindness, whatever it is that I think might help me in that time of being caught up in my anger. Or I can insult you or call you names or, punch you. Like those are all actions I can take too. And trying to figure out, all right, which one do I want to do in this moment? I don't believe as a human being, we are just stuck doing whatever our first impulse is. I mean, my first impulse a lot of times is to want to hurt people. Just that's the first, like, you made me mad, you cut me off in traffic, I want to take my car and bash it into the back of your car, Now I know, like, oh, wait a minute, we don't do that because we like our life and we like our car and there's consequences that come along with that. So I guess that's a long way to get to. That's how a lot of these principles apply as well, like self-discipline. What that means for me is when I'm in a moment of wanting to do something that goes against my morals and values, I'm not just innately subject to whatever the inner voice in my head tells me I must do in that moment. Like I have some ability to not do a thing that's going to cause me harm or cause harm to someone else.
And for anybody that wants to cause harm to someone else, make sure you back into them because you don't want to fuck your engine up. It's a lot cheaper to fix.
You can't get away.
Yeah, right. You can fix the trunk way cheaper. It's just body work. So don't ever hit them with the front of your car. Just say. So yeah, I buy into that. I guess the problem for me comes up with, going back, and I feel like we do this every fucking episode almost, going back to the Polyvagal Theory episode, right? If we take the nervous system into account and the nervous system reaction triggers a memory from 20 years ago that you know about or don't know about, and it hits your limbic system in your brain and sets off the survival alarms because the limbic system has no sense of time. It doesn't know that you're an adult now and way bigger and can protect yourself, and that shit's not the same anymore. So it just reacts the same way. Just like it would for somebody who was in Vietnam and they're, they hear a backfire and they're hiding between cars trying to duck bullets. Like it's that same thing. There's no time frame in the survival brain. So it doesn't know you're like 20 years later and that situation doesn't exist anymore. So it's triggered and it's going to do whatever it does because it doesn't have access to higher level thinking at that point. You don't have the ability to say, I'm going to do self-discipline here and patience because those seem better.
Yeah, I mean, I follow all that. I don't want to say somewhat, because I agree with that. I would say, at least when I think of self-discipline, it's not typically in those type of survival skills. Like the guy that hears the backfire noise, I'm not going to say, well, you just need more self-discipline. Like that would help you not react to that. Like, no, that's not. There's something different going on there. When I think of self-discipline, like say, it's usually things centered around self-gratification or instant gratification or self-fulfillment or, doing things that I know aren't good for me or aren't good for my family or aren't good for maybe people around me. But then I'm doing them anyway because whatever motivation is there, it feels good. I need it that way. So I guess that's where I look at that a little differently. I don't typically put self-discipline into this category of like a survival technique.
But I feel like, so when you describe the car situation, to me, somebody driving fast and recklessly and cutting me off throws me right into a survival anxiety, fight or flight state, right? So I was picturing that one, I guess. But even in a lot of these other ones that I think are day to day, where maybe we wouldn't say so much of a survival situation, for instance, the lady in the red dress, right, that we see off to the side that makes us think about, possibly leaving our spouse or going behind our spouse's back. Maybe that situation isn't creating a survival response in itself, but I feel like, at least from the way I'm starting to view people more and more, I think people are spending 60, 70, 80, 90% of their day in survival response already. So if you're already there, how much better does the girl in the red dress look as a relieving coping skill? You know what I mean? So it's not so much like, is this triggering the survival state that's going to make me do it? But it's more, I don't have access to this more mature part of my brain anyway throughout most of my day because I'm just reacting to everything through survival.
Yeah, and that's, I would think for myself, that's why this concept of self-discipline comes up later in the steps, because I've hopefully done a lot of work to address a lot of my character defects. Hopefully I've done, fourth and fifth step to deal with some of my history and some of my past, harms and traumas. I've done an eighth and ninth step. So hopefully I've looked at some harms that I've caused, hopefully dealt with some of my guilt and shame, so I agree with you that that's where a lot of people are. I would also agree that's why we lack so much self-discipline in our, day-to-day living, is that we haven't sort of worked up to that skill. Like I say, that reading really made the most sense to me, is like self-discipline is a culmination of a bunch of other things. I've already done a bunch of work to figure out, all right, what are my morals and values? Maybe my physical health is important to me. So I have some decisions that I can make then if my physical health is important to me. But if I don't give a shit about my physical health, then I don't care what I eat. I don't care what kind of exercise I do. I don't care how many cigarettes I smoke. Because I don't have that concept or that value built into me yet. And that process of step work has led me to figure out, okay, these are some of my values. These are some of the things I want to do in my life. This is the kind of person I want to be. I want to be a committed husband. I want to be a committed father. I want to, have a nice, stable family and home life. That means I'm home a lot. I give up opportunities to go hang out with friends or date other women or, spend my money in Las Vegas gambling on sports. So I've decided okay, these are my values. So I'm not just going to act on whatever impulse or desire calls me at the moment.
I guess a lot of what I do in here is trying to take my new or newer understandings of what I've learned through schooling to do therapy, what I've learned through the process of going to trainings for therapy, what I learned through just interacting with fucking 25 people each week and trying to learn more about them. I'm trying to take these ideas that I feel like are pretty researched, or at least, long-standing ideas that have worked in the therapy field, and apply them to the 12-step recovery model and see if it holds up. I guess that's what I'm trying to do a lot of times on this show. Okay. And what it feels like for me. So I'm thinking of what has helped me? So in that survival brain, God, I feel like I'm going 12 different places. Sorry. So ADHD, right? There's a belief that there's a part of the brain, the orbital frontal cortex, which has something to do with you seeing, but also in your ability to switch between what's important or priority in your life. So in people with ADHD, the research says that it doesn't mature the normal way it would. We're assuming that's because of not a stable family environment, right? The ACEs that we talked about on that one episode. But maybe it's not. Maybe it's genetic. Who knows, right? But either way, the idea is their part of the brain, the orbital frontal cortex, doesn't have the ability to do what most of ours does, right? So normally, like, if you were sitting here, honestly, you're taking in the way your pants feel against your legs, the way your socks and shoes feel against your feet. Like you can, if you sit and think, you can probably feel your shoulders, your shirt like hanging on your shoulders. Like you can feel all these things. But the orbital frontal cortex is the piece that says, that's not relevant for what you're doing right now. You can ignore it. And for ADHD people, it doesn't have that ability to do that. It just goes with whatever looks shiny and fun in the moment, right? And so thinking about that, I guess one of the things that can help to mature, obviously stable, safe environment is part of what we need to grow healthily, right? Even as an adult, when we're trying to heal, we need this stable, safe environment. And we need a way to start practicing having our body be uncomfortable in ways it hadn't before, right? Not extremely uncomfortable. We don't want to go out to the extremes where we're being traumatized again, but just a little, right? We want to slowly increase what they call the window of tolerance. And so meditation would be a practice that would do this. And I'm picturing the 12-step process is probably a process that can possibly assist in this getting to a calmer level brain that doesn't need to react to these triggering responses you're talking about, or doesn't need to react in ways we used to. So you can think through to the end, like I want the stable family home. I'm not going to do these things in the interim that'll mess that up. But what I'm wondering right now is the 12-step model a model that can work and just happens to for some people, kind of like a treatment for cancer, just happens to sort of work for some DNA people and not other DNA people? And maybe that's what it is. It's not that the 12 steps necessarily can't help you in that process of calming your body and getting there, but maybe, you know, and the research of how many people it's effective for is so fucking crazy. Right. It's somewhere between 3 and 50% or whatever. Right. But maybe those 3 and 50% that it's working for, maybe we're holding it and kind of lording it over other people. Like, God damn it, you just got to do it like we did, and not respecting like, oh, this only works for a percentage of people. Like other people got to do it differently, or their body will never be in that calm state to be able to do these other things. So that's kind of fascinating for me.
I was going to say, yes, there's a lot there, and a couple things. With the addiction in general, I think a lot of people that end up in addiction have other mental health issues along with that. For, I don't know, I want to say a large majority, but for some of them have never even really been addressed. I mean, to be honest, I've never really been to like a therapist. I mean, well, I've been to a therapist recently. It's been the first time I've ever went to like a individual therapist. I've been to some therapist at counseling, like, or at treatment, but never like a long-term relationship with a therapist or a psychiatrist to actually be diagnosed with any mental health condition. Right. So I probably could have a mental health condition. I don't fucking know. Never spent the time to bother to learn. And I imagine that's most addicts, you know what I mean? Like, I did a bunch of drugs, I stopped doing drugs, I go to this 12-step thing, and now that's all I need. Like, I'm good.
Well, I mean, in general, this is so much better than that it's hard to think there's better.
Right. Right.
Like, who would know?
But, so, there are going to be some people that just because of their mental disabilities or whatever mental condition they may have, just don't have the ability to do some of these things. The other issue...
Can I respond to that one first?
Yeah.
I guess I look at that different. So when we talk about like co-occurring disease or you know, dual addicted or any of those kind of ideas, like I don't picture addiction being this separate thing like, oh, Billy, you've got addiction and anxiety, or you've got substance use disorder and anxiety. The way I picture it in my head is, oh, you got some fucked up feelings in your body, whether that's anxiety, whatever we want to call it, and you used because of that. So I would say every person that's had a problem with problematic drug use has something.
Yeah.
Because I don't see you using it if
yeah,
not.
I guess I was thinking more from the, like you used the ADHD example.
Right.
Like some people, like there's some chemistry going on in their brains that's not where it needs to be. And that's, the 12 steps are not going to fix that. You know what I mean?
Like if you're lacking dopamine or something.
Right. You're going to need to see some sort of professional,
yes,
whether it's to be on medication or some sort of additional trauma therapy or whatever. Like the 12 steps are never going to fix that. For that.
We're on the same page now.
Yeah.
Okay, what was your second thought?
The other thing is that the 12-step process is very, and I forget the word, but it's all like self-driven. Like it's only, the information that I put into that work is only as deep as I want to go, or as much as, or able to. And that's a good example. You know, even for me, someone who's been around 20 years and been through the steps, and been through the steps with other people, multiple people, there's still things now. I'm going back through the process now, and I'm still writing things in my current 4th step that are similar, like resentments with people that I thought that I had worked with, that I thought that I was okay with, that are still like relevant in my life now as I gain new information, learn new stuff about myself. As we both started listening to the same audiobook about trauma and that's effects. And so it's like, oh my gosh, like I have some lingering effects from some of this traumatic stuff that happened to me as a kid. And what I've done up to this point has been like, yep, that shit happened. I'm good. Let's roll. And I haven't really addressed some of that stuff.
Right.
I imagine, and not that I want to minimize my own trauma, but I imagine if people's trauma is severe enough or they haven't went just deep enough to deal with it, the 12-step process isn't going to keep them from feeling that pain and going back, using an appealing choice. I mean, I've always looked at it as it can work for anyone, but maybe not by itself, for one. Some other people may need some additional things, and everybody could probably benefit from additional things, to be honest. And it won't work for everyone. It can, but it won't for some, for different reasons.
It's almost, and I actually love the way you pointed all that out, because I feel like I spent a lot of my recovery not acknowledging that other people might have it worse, have had more trauma, have had a larger reaction to that trauma. Like it was always this comparison of, I did this, you can just do that, why the fuck aren't you? Right. And never like this belief that like, oh, maybe that's too much for your fucking nervous system, right? Maybe it was all right for mine and it's not for yours. Or so in general, like, the 12 steps, it's a well laid out plan for self-reflection. Like it's a great tool for that. But if you can't feel safe in your body, it's not going to fucking matter.
Right.
And that's kind of what I just heard you saying. And I think that's absolutely accurate. Like it's not anything bad about the 12 steps. It's just, it might have more limitations than I've ever previously been willing to see.
And I think that's, tying back into the self-discipline. Like I think self-discipline is almost the same thing. Like if I am just so much in pain or so like suffering all the time, giving in to impulses, that's just what I'm gonna do. You know what I mean? Like I'm gonna be like, man, fuck it. Like I know I'm not supposed to do this, but it feels good now, and that's what I need for this moment, or I'm just gonna fucking kill myself.
Yes. So I don't know what episode we talked about it on, but I remember sharing with you that idea of like the thought experiment of thinking through when suicide seemed like a rational choice. And it's that same idea. Like if your body feels, I hate to use the word good and bad, but it's just the easiest ones that people get. If you feel fucking bad inside all the time, pretty much, you're going to seek relief in whatever way possible. Anything that brings joy, right? And I have people tell me this. They're like, look, food is the only fucking joy I get in my day. And they weigh a lot. And they're like, I want to lose weight, but how the fuck do I give up the only thing that feels good? And I'm like, I'm not here to tell you to, because I get it. Like, that's the last thing we want to do is stress your body.
Or I think back to even having, a couple of young kids. I mean, my kids are adults now, and I sort of joke with people, but it's true. Like the amount of freedom that I have in my life now, just because my kids are 20, 18, and 14, and they can like make their own food and they do their own laundry and they take care of their own rooms and they get to events they need to get to. Like all of a sudden, that has unlocked a whole bunch of capabilities for me because I don't have those demands. You know, I hate to use the word demands. I mean, they're my kids. I brought them here. Yeah, responsibilities. But it's like I have all those other responsibilities just taking all my resources. So I don't have the resources to get up at 5 o'clock and go to the gym. But now I do because I don't have all those resources being spent. So, hey, yeah, fuck it. I can get up and go to the gym.
Right.
So there are those things too. Like we have to look at our life situation and what's going on around us and try to work some of that out. This episode has been brought to you in part by Voices of Hope, Inc., a nonprofit recovery organization made up of people in recovery, family members, and allies. Together, members strive to protect the dignity of those that use drugs and those in recovery by advocating for treatment, harm reduction and support resources, and mentoring. Please visit us at www.voicesofhopemaryland.org and consider donating to our cause.
So I didn't come up, usually we kind of have a sort of list of like the pitfalls of not having this spiritual principle or the dangers that exist in your life when you don't have it and the benefits of having it and the practices of getting to it. Like mostly because I couldn't figure out this whole self-discipline, willpower, self-control idea. I couldn't get to any of that. Yeah. But I mean, I think that the drawback is obvious. Like if you can't stop yourself from doing shit that doesn't work out well for you, like that's pretty evident how that's not going to work for your life.
Well, and even a basic question to sort of look at and ask yourself is, what do you think the drawbacks would be if you didn't live by your own morals and values? What? Because those aren't superficial things to me. Those are a lot of the reasons why I sought recovery in the first place. Is like by not living in accordance with my own morals and values, I didn't like myself. You know what I mean? I didn't like the person that I was. I had no self-worth. I had no, self-respect. I was lost because I thought, I had something inside of me telling me I wanted to be one way, but then the life I was living and my actions were a different way. And so the only way I could reconcile that was just to be high all the time because I was miserable. And to me, like that's kind of a lack of self-discipline. It's like I have to figure out, all right, what are my morals and values? What are the person that I want to be? And then let's try to, put some things in place to get there.
So I remember when I, said, hey, what do you think about doing a spiritual principle every month next year? and in my head, I had this idea that was going to be like, oh man, we're going to tell people actual, like legitimate, concrete ways to practice these to get better. And I feel like we have had next to zero ways to actually practice many of these. I feel like you disagree because you've probably given a way to practice it each time. And I'm like, I don't know if I believe that.
I guess I've looked at it as what is the benefit of trying to practice them? Because, so when you talk about self-discipline, I don't know that there's a way specifically for me to improve my self-discipline other than to say, hey, look, my physical health is important. I'm getting to be older. I don't like getting up in the morning and my back hurts and that's what motivated me to go to the gym. Through the process of recovery, I've learned hey, you have a problem. What do you want to do about it? Do you want to do nothing? Because that's the thing I could say, well, that's just a part of getting older and that's who I am. And or I could say, no, I want to change some things about myself and try to be different. And then once I can make those decisions, then I can start to practice self-discipline. But even in the practicing of it, I'm not perfect all the time. I don't make it to the gym every day. I make it probably at least 4 days a week, some weeks 5 days a week, but it's better than having none.
Right. I think listening to you so far on this episode, if I was to say, well, how does Billy practice self-discipline? I would be like, well, he probably practices patience and tolerance and some of the other ones you mentioned. I'm like, It almost felt like when you were talking about those earlier, that self-discipline was like a byproduct not really one that we went in full force ready to do. Not like I need to get more self-discipline. It was like, let me practice these other things. And then self-discipline was the almost unintended result. I mean, it might be intended, but
Yeah, sometimes it's intentional. I mean, sometimes it's like, oh, this is a thing I want to do. I can go into it going, I know it's going to take some commitment, you know.
Right.
But for me, that's the way all the principles, like they all work together. You know, it's like these couple over here and these couple over here, you know, help me to do this or that. It's, you know, figuring out like as a parent, I just don't go, well, I can just love and that makes me a good parent. Like, no, it takes some other things too. It does take some patience and some kindness and maybe a little tolerance, you know. Like,
I wanted to argue that so bad, but I think I agree.
yeah. You know, and that's the way a lot, like self-discipline. Like, it's not just like I can't practice it by itself in a vacuum. I mean, I can, I guess, but I probably will struggle with it, and it probably won't have as much meaning if I'm not really concrete on the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing, or if I don't have well-established morals and values to tell me what I want to do.
I'm like, the Beatles said all we needed was love, Billy. It's enough. It's enough, goddammit. No.
It's a foundation. It's like building a house or, you know, building a pyramid. Like, you build these other pieces in place. In the beginning of our recovery, like, we just stop using drugs. That's what I heard. Just stop fucking using drugs. Come to some of these meetings. You'll figure it out. And that's the basis of self-discipline. I mean, that's the first thing. All right, just don't get high no matter what. That's self-discipline. Like, I want to get high. It fucking feels good. I think I won't today. And it starts there, and then as we build up and build up and build up, we start realizing, oh wait, you mean I don't have to gamble away all my money? You know, I don't have to cheat on my relationships. I don't have to do these. No, you can practice not doing what feels good.
Yeah, that's so hard, especially when when it feels so bad internally.
Yeah. But that's why it does, you know, that's why we don't say, you know, and I mean, I've heard at least in 12-step meetings, people don't recommend that you come in and change a bunch of stuff all at once, you know. Don't come in and quit smoking cigarettes and start trying to eat well and start trying to do 20 things, you know, you get overwhelmed.
I feel like I'm failing at self-discipline because my goddamn knee and my lower back hurt, and I made a commitment on vacation this summer. I was like, I'm going home. I'm making them doctor's appointments. I'm like getting the shit looked at. Nope, I haven't done it.
It's weird to like, I still struggle with self-discipline. None of these are things that I'm perfect at by any stretch. Fucking coffee and caffeine is my nemesis for any kind of self-discipline that I have. I like to get up early. I like to get up at 5, you know, every morning so that I can fit in my other stuff in my morning routine. I will drink coffee after like 6:30. And I know it doesn't keep me from falling asleep, and I don't know what the fuck it is. I will drink coffee and then I'll go to bed at my normal time, like 10 o'clock. And then at like 1 o'clock in the morning, I wake up and I'm like wide awake. I'm like, oh, is it time to get up? And then I look at the clock. I'm like, fuck.
The coffee nap.
I know that's going to happen.
Yeah.
I could tell you it's going to happen. And yet Wednesday night at my home group, I'm going to get there and be like, man, fuck it. I'm going to have a cup of coffee. It'll be fine. I'll deal with it. You know, I usually get through it anyway.
I go back to sleep eventually.
Yeah, eventually I go back to sleep, and Thursdays aren't that. And then like Thursday, because my home group's on Wednesday, Thursday every week, I'm like, why the fuck did I do this again? And it's all just, I want that cup of coffee. I want it. And I just haven't been able to reconcile that, you know. And it's something little and stupid, but it's like knowing that I shouldn't do it, knowing that because what happens is then the next day I'm like irritable at work and I'm fucking short with my coworkers, and you know, I'm not the person that I want to be in my life. Causes me to be somebody I don't like.
So tell me this one. Okay. So I got a similar problem, but it's a little different. The last 2 nights I've had to get up early for different events. One, recording this. Yesterday it was my son's soccer game. And knowing I had to get up early, I said, I'm really going to make sure I get to bed at a good time tonight. And I did. I mean, I was like laying in my bed before 10 o'clock both nights. And yet, both nights, because I went to bed so early, instead of getting up with my alarm at 6:30, I've been up at 5 or 5:15. And I'm like, this is because I went to bed so early. So I was like almost too responsible for myself.
Right.
And I don't know what to do with that. Like sometimes I can go back to bed. Other days I just get up and I'm like, fuck it, I got extra time to myself. And it doesn't seem to negatively impact me too much, but I'm like, I wanted to sleep the whole 8 hours. That was the point of going to bed 8 hours before I got up.
Right.
So what do you, like, how do I fix that? Like, is that a lack of self-discipline?
It is in a way. But so there's a bunch of nerdy information on this weird podcast I like called the Huberman Lab. He's like a neuroscientist from, I think, Stanford or Harvard or anyway. And they go into the real neuroscience behind a lot of that stuff. And sleep is one that he spends a lot of times a lot about sleep and our patterns of sleep. And like if you have a late night on Saturdays and Sundays, there's like almost like a protocol that you need to do for Monday to get yourself back into your circadian rhythm. And it's all the sciencey, nerdy shit that you would probably love because it's all based in, your brain shit and how your brain reacts to stuff.
I would be so locked into like, oh, I have to eat carrots at 7:58 on Sundays to make this work. Like I would get so black and white about it.
But it's all, like your circadian rhythm is a thing that likes to be consistent. It likes consistency. It wants you to go to sleep at the same time and get up at the same time. And if you start trying to monkey that around, it throws it off. Like it doesn't know what to do. So it's either going to try to get up at the same time or it's going to try to,
Well, that thing is stupid.
Stupid brain.
Right. If I give myself 8 hours to sleep, I should get all goddamn 8 hours of it. That was the point of being responsible. It was to
Well, and then there's all the
myself.
weird. You could suck down some melatonin or make sure you shut out every light in the room. But me, it's TV. I'll sit up at night. I don't watch a lot of TV, but usually it's like by the end of the night, I get in bed, I'll turn on the TV. And usually I look for a sporting event. And if there's no sporting event, I'll watch something else, that I don't have to think much about. But I have found certain shows I have to avoid because I will get locked into them. Like I'll get engaged in them and then I don't want to go to sleep. And then I'll stay up way past my bedtime. Whereas other shows, like I got to watch stuff that doesn't interest me all that much so that when it's time to go to sleep, I'll go to sleep. And that draw to keep watching.
What do you watch that doesn't interest you that much?
So I will watch a lot of those like murder shows of like one that, and it's kind of fun, but it's like I don't mind turning it off and going to sleep. It's like Scariest Neighbor or something like that, where it's like neighbors that get into feuds and then murder each other.
Jesus.
Yeah. A lot of those, like I'll watch home renovation shows late at night.
Well, that's a little more wholesome for your bedtime viewing, at least.
Well, that's actually why I was like, oh, these murder shows probably are not good right before I go to sleep.
Right.
Like, there's got to be something there that, is not good. Because it was serial killers for a while, and then it was like the murder shows. And But if they're too interesting, like those, like the 48 Hours or some of those Datelines and stuff like that, those, they build up to like a climactic, ending. Those keep me engaged and I'll stay up too late. So I can't watch that kind of shit.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't have that. I have my phone. Phone's a problem, but not. I'm looking at memes and shit.
Yeah. But see, that's what I mean. Like I learned some things about myself and I pay attention and be like, oh, what's causing me to get out of, what things do I struggle with self-discipline on, or what things are causing me to struggle here, and then I decide whether I want to do something about it. And sometimes I still watch Dateline and stay up too late, or drink coffee late at night.
So I did find this one article that I liked, and it had a pretty interesting paragraph or two about self-discipline, and I thought maybe this would be relevant to share. So the person said their definition of willpower and self-control is when we believe there is an external plan, diet, or eating approach that is the right way to eat, and all we have to do is have the will and self-control to follow the rules, and then we will be good. We believe the plan is over there, right? Not something that we know or intuitively can figure out. It's like, oh, there's the plan. I can look at it. I just need to go follow that, right? It says it invites us to disconnect with ourselves, our lifestyle, our experience, and our inner knowing. Instead of using our inner wisdom as a path to help guide us to the goal, we abandon ourselves and then wonder why we can't will or control ourselves enough to get to the goal. It's like you are constantly fighting against yourself and you're never going to win. And I love this idea of self-discipline.
Me too. I like that a lot.
She went in a little further and said, for me, self-discipline is a process of getting to know yourself and your truths, and then practicing becoming the kind of person who honors and lives that truth. And I feel like that's the most relevant self-discipline information that I could find. And it makes me think of a practice that I really try to do with the people I see, which is we try to get to the basis of like being more aware of when you think should, or the idea of should. So the human brain does this in a lot of different ways. We have, we'll be sitting on a couch and we might think to ourselves, I should be doing the dishes. I should be doing the laundry. Or I need to be doing the laundry. Why am I sitting here doing nothing like a lazy ass? Or I have to be doing the laundry. So like need, have, and should are usually these words that come to our thoughts. They're usually critical about what we're not accomplishing or how we could be accomplishing something better, right? And it leads me back to this idea of counter will. And I don't know that many of us in our society, everyday people know about this, but like counter will is a thing that comes up in our bodies when somebody's telling us we have to do something. Even if it's something you want to do, you immediately have counter will. And what I kind of believe, I guess, is that as we get older, instead of these external forces having as much counter will come up in us, it's our own self. It's our own self with all these shoulds, have tos, and needs, because that is the external plan that someone programmed into us. So we've got like this societal and parental external plan that was given to us of what we're supposed to be doing. And then we have what we feel we're really supposed to be doing. And the counter will comes up because we don't want to follow somebody else's plan. Even though it's coming from our thoughts, it's all other people's shit. And that makes it impossible to have self-discipline because we instantly go to counter will. So when we're telling ourselves, I should be eating better all day, and shaming ourselves, counter will pops up and we eat like shit at night. And so like this paragraph that I'm reading from this individual, this makes total sense to me, because when you can stop shoulding yourself to death, right, you eliminate the counter will and have more of the ability to just do what you wanted to do in the situation to begin with, instead of having all these forces behind the scenes like battling it out about whether you're going to have the resources to.
Yeah, and that's where I think it's important, at least for me, it came from the 12 steps, but the work we do on ourselves and our growth, that we figure out what's important. Because like say, I don't always want to do the dishes either, but I don't should myself into doing the dishes. I'm like, well, it's nicer when they're done and it feels better. So like I know the motivations behind why I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm not just doing it out of some should or some guilt or whatever else.
Right.
The other thing that's given me a lot of breaks for myself in like that idea is that people are all very different. Like we're not the same. Which is exactly why the 12 steps work for some people great, and they're this amazing thing, and some people it's not, and some people don't even get why it works at all. But, we're all a little different in what motivates us, how physically, what our physical things are. So like when you talked about diet, well, those diets in general work for some people, but other people, like their metabolism is very different. The amount of caloric intake they need is very different for different reasons. Going to the gym. When I first started going to the gym, I was like, man, I'm going to get big. And like, I'm never going to, I could maybe get big. I'd have to eat like 2 dozen eggs every day and probably
Steroids.
3 fucking steaks. Yeah, I could take steroids. I'm not doing that. But, after a little, and when I first started going in there, I was like, yeah, I'm going to start, I'm going to try to get jacked and fucking start lifting heavy stuff. My shoulder starts hurting. I start, I'm like, wait a minute, calm down. Like, that's just not. Like, that's not really you. And the truth is that isn't even really what I want to do. The reasons I was going there was for health and whatever else. But then I'm like, well, I'm going, I'm going to get these big shoulders and shit. And then I had to get, like, realistic about what, my goals could be. Like, and then once I was more realistic about what my goals could be, that made the self-discipline more easy. If I was just going in there like, oh, I'm going to get jacked, and then in 6 months when I wasn't, my arms weren't 2 times wider, I'd want to give the fuck up. You know what I mean? I'd be like, oh, I quit. This isn't working. I've tried, I tried and it's not working. And it's like, I have to be realistic about what my expectations are, what my motivations are, and just try to get in touch with me to figure out those things.
No, and I love that. It's not an analogy because you actually lived it, but that example, I guess, of that, because that's exactly it. And it makes me picture all the times where someone stood in front of me and said, hey, I'm in this program, I'm doing this, and yet my life's not getting better. And I'm like, oh, well, you're not working the steps. And they're like, well, I don't want to work the steps. And I'm like, well, that's what you need to do. Right? Like that's that same thing that's going to produce counter will in them.
Right.
Like that's not going to ever get them any closer. So I'm picturing the 12-step fellowship environment and like, that's exactly what the fuck we tell people. You have to work the steps, live the steps or die. Like it's all these fucking ways that you have to, you need to, it's the answer. And that's not going to work for somebody that doesn't want to. That's actually going to push them further the fuck away from doing it.
And that's why as members, I mean, we should focus on that. If you look at what the literature says, it's like we share our experience, strength, and hope. We share what works for us. It's not about lecturing people about what they fucking need to do. I never was good at that, The courts told me what I needed to do. My parents told me what I needed to do. The cops wanted to tell, and I was like, well, I'm going to do what the fuck I want to do.
Well, I feel like we forget that, though, because it says right in one of our opening readings, this is a program that wants to know what you want to do about your problem and how we can help. And yet then we come in, everybody comes in and we tell them what to do about their problem.
What they should be doing.
Right. And I guess that's I feel like that is the culture of 12-step, and I feel like it's counterproductive to the goal we're trying to accomplish, which is to get people to want to work the 12 steps, because it's attraction, not promotion. And I would say that comes not just for coming to a meeting. It's the attraction of, hey, that guy's working steps and look how his life looks different. I want something like that, not the promotion of you need to work the fucking steps because that's how this program works.
Right.
I don't know, though, but we don't do that.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, at least for myself, I think, I've grown and changed and try to be better in my approach to some of that now. I used to want to, shame people that have been around forever and hadn't worked steps. Now I'm like, hey, you've been here 7 years and you're still here. That's good. It's better than the alternative.
Okay. So you walk into a meeting, and I don't know how this is different up here in Cecil County versus Baltimore, or 2022 versus 2015. But if you walk into a meeting and there's 100 members there, how many would you say are probably more of the opinion that we need, people just need to work the fucking steps, and not necessarily kind of like you, where it's more like, hey, do what's good for your life?
I hate to say, it feels like people don't work the steps near as much as they used to now. It feels way less.
That's interesting, because I feel like at least 70 people out of that 100 are saying more of the style of what I'm criticizing. Y'all just need to work the fucking steps. That's the solution.
So I guess and this isn't to get too off of your question, but what's baffling to me is people will say all the time, I work the program, but they're not working steps. And I'm like, well, the program is the steps. That's what it is. There's some other things with it, abstinence and all this other stuff, but that's a big part of it too. But anyway, no, I think that's the general attitude, consensus. If you were to take a consensus, and maybe this gets into your counter will thing, but probably most of the people that aren't actively working steps, and even ones that don't have sponsors, will still tell you that's what they should be doing, or that's what,
right.
So I would agree people would say that, but who's actually doing it?
Who's actually telling people they need to work the steps or something like that? Yeah. It's just more of the underlying belief system.
Yeah, and I don't get out as much as I used to. And of course, I don't usually pay attention. I mean, I don't say I don't pay attention to that much, but usually when I go in, I'm not looking for that. Who's telling people what they should do, and who's the obviously overbearing people stand out.
We should hit a couple meetings together and go in and tally, keep track of how many. Oh, they just expressed you have to work the steps. Oh, they just expressed it again. Because I think you're right. I would not even say that 70 people out of that 100 were actually actively working steps.
Right.
But 70 out of 100 are going to give that idea at least. Yeah. Right. That's the way this works, whether it's about you or themselves. That's
I
crazy.
probably hear more, I should be working steps right now than you should be working steps.
Right. Right.
More people. I know what I should be doing, but, I'm not.
Yeah, but I guess I wonder how much of that I should be doing is actually what's keeping them from being able to do it. I feel like we need to get rid of
lack self-discipline.
Right. But you can't have self-discipline when you got everybody else's ideas of how you need to live in there. And so I guess we both like this idea of self-discipline is getting in tune with yourself and then doing that on purpose. And I've actually heard that in recovery before. Somebody said, the purpose of recovery is to figure out who you are and do it on purpose. And I love that. I never really understood it till today, actually, which is crazy. But yeah, like if we believe that, so how do you increase your ability to know yourself? If that's the true answer to finding more self-discipline is figuring out what you actually want, because it's easier to follow when it's what you want versus what everybody else has told you. How do we get there?
In the 12-step fellowship, we believe it's steps 1 through 7.
That didn't get me there, God damn it.
Right.
I think that can be helpful for sure. No, I mean, writing down our patterns, our cycles. I mean, that's part of what we're looking for in therapy, right? Trying to establish like these patterns of action that aren't serving us well.
Yeah, and just self-awareness. I mean, and it's amazing. Like, I feel like I'm so good at self-awareness in certain areas of my life and like more intellectual things. I'm terrible at it with emotional stuff. You know, I'm like emotionally, I'm not very, intelligent at all. And so, but I'm learning that about myself, and the awareness part comes in, like the, guy I'm talking to was saying, like, well, think about when you go to eat something that you really like and you look forward to eating it. Like, how physically does that make you feel? And paying attention to those physical changes. But it's, just paying attention to what my body's telling me or how I feel about certain things to try to get in touch with emotions.
Somebody was telling me the other day about the theory of the 8 forms of intelligence, and they were going into some of them. Like there's the one we all celebrate, like the logical, mathematical form of intelligence. But then there's all these other forms of like emotional intelligence. There's spatial intelligence, intrapersonal, interpersonal. There was obviously 8 of them. But like, I was like, damn, we don't ever think of these in ways of like, when you say that person's stupid, you're not like evaluating their whole person and if they know anything about anything.
They can be very emotionally intelligent, super sensitive, a great listener.
Yeah.
But they can't do math, so they're dumb.
Maybe they're great at interior design and just can tell how a room comes together. Right? Yeah, but like, maybe they can't divide 48 by 4 or something in their head. And we just judge that.
Yeah, that's definitely, I think, a cultural problem. But.
Yeah. But I think it does also, it's another piece of what gets in the way, right? If we're looking to match up to the world in this logical, mathematical intelligence, we're actually ignoring the gifts we have in some other area where we do have like an innate or intuitive way of just being because we understand things in ways other people don't. Right. So it's, I guess really for me, the process of self-discipline is really about just reevaluating my whole life. It's like starting from the bottom and saying, is this truly something I want, or is this what my parents in the world gave me? And that's hard to fucking get to because a lot of that is deep. Yeah. And it comes in your own voice and your own head. So.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. And, that's where, for me, staying engaged in the process of recovery has continued to help. For some people, it's therapy. For different people, they get that, maybe from a church family or a pastor or something, but it's important that we have those people that we can engage with that are going to encourage us to keep growing and keep looking at ourselves and keep figuring out who we are. Because that shit changes too, over
it's
time.
A moving target.
Yeah, what I want and what I think I want out of my life, change over time.
Yeah, I don't want all the same shit I wanted at 25.
No.
Not by far.
Right.
Some of it still.
Right, yeah, right.
Some of it's the same. Well, it's okay. So if it's about figuring ourselves out, how would I say to do that? I do think the 12 steps are a great form of self-reflection and it's almost like journaling about different events in your life in different ways. So I think that's a very useful tool. I think therapy is a really useful tool for self-exploration and figuring out who you are. If you can't afford therapy or it's just not something you're interested in, there's like self-help workbooks or like, now there's fucking so many different like trauma workbooks or processing trauma or dealing with depression.
And for me, the audiobooks that I've listened to in the last probably 2 to 3 years, just the amount of like self-awareness I've gained just from listening to these audiobooks has been amazing.
Audiobooks, definitely. Podcasts, another one that
I mean,
has
you
some
could
good
read
information.
a book too, but who's got fucking time for that?
Fucking reading. I mean, unless you discover that reading is part of what's good for your life. Like, fuck all that noise. No, but yeah, I think there are these ways. And I think maybe the last piece I would say is the regular practice of these things, right? Whether it's journaling, steps, therapy, a workbook, a podcast, an audiobook, like if you're doing this regularly, whatever that means for your life, 3 times a week, once a week, whatever, I think it just keeps our brain in that mode of like you said, when you pray, right? The whole idea of like, oh, I'm raising awareness around it so I catch it more often during my week. And I think the regular practice helps with that.
Well, and I don't know about for you, but for me, like audiobooks in my head usually go this way. So I'll listen to a new book. Let's say I can sound intelligent and say I've read a new book.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, that's the end. Like, oh, this is exactly how I'm going to live my whole life. I've just figured out exactly what I needed.
Just got to tape my mouth shut.
This is going to be it. Yeah, right. I'm great now. And then, like, 2 or 3 months in, like, forgot half of what was in that book. I'm trying to convince myself I need to listen to it again. And then forgot all the important shit. And then I find a new book, and it's the next new. It's got all the answers. It just fixed everything that I needed. And then 3 months later, I forgot half of what's in that book. But in that process, there's been 2 or 3 like really important gems of stuff that I've taken that have contributed, to the whole, or maybe built on other ideas, because I listen to a lot of similarly based books, on self-help and compassion and, living healthy, hopefully. I'm not listening to like Wolves of Wall Street books there, how to conquer the stock market, fuck that stuff.
No romance novels?
Nah, no romance novels.
She seductively laid back on her back on the beach chair.
But it's like this, just continuing in the process, I guess, is where I was going with that. Right. It's like, it's just important that I keep moving forward, and that, I take those 1 or 2 nuggets and I just keep rolling forward a little at a time.
Well, and I think it is a rolling sort of avalanche building kind of process for some people, right? And I think this is true for me and you. Like, we are really, really interested in being the best people we can possibly be, or in, striving for like these relationships that we really want in our lives. And it's just whatever it is, it's worth and captures our interest to continue this journey of self-awareness. Like, I've yet to get to a point where I'm like, oh, this is fucking good. I'm healthy enough. Like, I don't need to do it anymore. Like, I'm always and maybe that is the, what people say, like the addict mentality or whatever. What the fuck ever. I want more growth. I want more healing. I want more connection and love in my life. And I do feel like the closer I've gotten to knowing me, or the true me, or whatever we want to call that, the better I feel and the more my life looks exactly like I want it to.
Yeah, I would agree.
All right. So, fucking self-discipline your ass into listening to this podcast every week, and have a good week. Did you like this episode? Share it with people you think might get something out of it. Check out the rest of our episodes at recoverysortof.com. Also, while you're there, you can find ways to link up with us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, YouTube, anything. We're always looking for new ideas. Got an idea you want us to look into? Reach out to us.